Thank you for everything. Did you get my Thanksgiving Day present? A cheerful voice reached my ears over the video phone. But my grandchild's face on the screen did nothing to brighten my heart. What's wrong with your face? My name is Haley. I am 60 years old and live alone while working part-time. I have one daughter, Mary, who also left home about 12 years ago when she got married. Living alone is sometimes lonely, but my late husband was a man who owned several apartments and condominiums, so I have no trouble making ends meet. My current part-time job was started out of loneliness, as it was better than staying at home alone. Fortunately, I have been blessed with good people at my part-time job, and I have even made some tea-drinking friends during the course of my employment. I am enjoying living alone more than I expected, and my latest concern is my daughter and her family who have moved abroad. Jacob, Mary's husband, works for a major company, and when he came to greet her on their wedding day, I was reassured by his appearance that he was a solid man. However, soon after their marriage, when Mary was pregnant with our grandchild, Grace, Jacob's attitude gradually changed. When he came home, he was quiet at first, but gradually began to reveal his true nature in front of me, sighing with disgust and saying things like, "Lately, Mary has been using the fact that she has a child as an excuse to have fun, as if he was truly At first, I was a little perplexed, but then I thought that maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding between the couple. So I softly followed up with, "It's not easy to nurture a life in your belly," but this did not seem to sit well with Jacob. Gradually but overtly, Jacob stopped coming to my house, and he seemed to be forcing Mary and Grace to do the same, and Mary told me I was told not to go. Thus, both Mary and Grace stopped coming over to my house so often, and I was left feeling lonely again in a different way. Even so, Mary would steal Jacob's eyes and come to see me with Grace. But it seemed to be difficult for her to do so, and although it was not often, I was looking forward to it very much. One day, after a long absence, Mary and Grace came to see me, and I greeted them at the front door. When I opened the front door and saw Mary and Grace, I felt something strange about them. The two of them seemed to have lost weight. At first, I thought about keeping quiet, but I thought they looked unhealthily thin, and knowing that Mary and Grace would give me trouble, I repeatedly tried to talk to Mary, asking her to tell me if there was something wrong. However, Mary would only smile helplessly and say that she was fine, but she would not tell me anything. I couldn't do anything if she wouldn't talk to me. So as a last resort, every time Mary said she had nothing to tell me, I would say, "Why don't you two go out and relax?" And I give her money. I was sure that there must be something going on between my daughter and her husband. Then Jacob was told that he would be transferred overseas, and my daughter and her husband would have to move abroad. I thought this might be a good opportunity and said, "Why don't the pupils live here?" I tried to keep Mary and Grace away from Jacob by saying, "I'll help you." But he brushed me off, saying in a firm tone, "It's none of your mother-in-law's business." After that, it was difficult to keep in touch with her, but recently, Grace began to contact me because she had learned how to use the video phone. However, Grace was also concerned about Jacob's eyes on her, and the time we could spend on video phone was very limited. After a while, Grace seemed to have gotten used to living abroad. One day, Grace, who had recently started making regular phone calls instead of video phone calls, told me that she sent a present to me. It will soon be Thanksgiving Day, and Grace decided to do so after consulting with Mary. Living abroad must be confusing for her, as many things are different from our culture here, but I was more than happy that she was thinking of me and acting in this way. I had felt that I had done nothing for them since I was still in the US, but by celebrating Thanksgiving Day in this way, I felt as if I had been saved. However, I was concerned about the lack of energy in Grace's voice in spite of her words. So I asked her, "Do you want to make a video phone call?" But when Grace gently refused, saying that she might tell me what was on the phone if I saw her face, I had no choice but to give up the idea. I talked with her for a while, but she seemed somewhat distant, which made me wonder if something had happened to her. The fact that she stopped making video phone calls a little while ago, as well as her listless voice, made me think that Jacob might be doing something terrible to her, and I was not in the mood for a phone call with Grace. Soon after the phone call with Grace ended, I also called Mary and asked her if she was okay. Mary answered that she was fine, but like Grace, her voice sounded, well, listless. I felt slightly uncomfortable with both Mary and Grace's attitude, but once both of them said they were fine, there was nothing I could do about it now. I would have been able to do something if they were still in the US and within my reach, but there was nothing I could do for them who were living abroad. While I was concerned about her family, I was looking forward to the present from Grace that would be arriving soon. And a few days later, a package arrived from the courier service. Wondering what kind of gift she had sent me, I excitedly opened the present box to find a tattered, bloodied handkerchief inside, causing me to scream, stunned for a moment by the scene unfolding before me. Not knowing what was going on, I remembered the listless eyes and Grace's voice in my head, and coming to my senses, I hurriedly decided to make a video phone call to Grace. "I'm going to make a video phone call now." Grace answered the video phone and said, "Thanks for everything. How are your presents?" She looked cheerful, but there was a big blue bruise on her face. When I saw it, I was blown out of my mind and asked, "What happened to your face?" Grace made a shocked face. She looked away for a moment. Then, with a troubled laugh, she said, "I fell down in gym class." But I didn't think that her reply was something wrong. When I asked her if it really happened in class or if there was something else going on, she only said that it happened in class. I repeated the question and answer several times, but Grace stubbornly refused to talk, and I was defeated. Grace seemed reluctant to tell me even after all I had done, so I took a deep breath and then regained my composure and switched to the subject of gifts. When Grace heard from me that the present was a handkerchief covered in blood, she suddenly turned pale and began to tremble, muttering, "It's my father," in an audible whisper. Grace's frightened look made me immediately realize that Jacob had also done the scratches on Grace's face. Rather, I think it was the shock of the gift that was sent to me that had not occurred to me since I saw the bruises on Grace's face until now. Then suddenly the door to the room is opened violently. Perhaps noticing that something was wrong with Grace, Jacob entered Grace's room despite being stopped. I don't know what he sensed, but it seems that Jacob was sensitive to Grace's strange behavior. The more that happened, the more it seemed as if Jacob had something. When Jacob realized that Grace was on a video phone with me, he instantly became furious with Mary and Grace. From the other side of the screen, "Whose money do you think you are living on?" And then we hear the sound of Jacob going on a rampage. In addition, I heard Mary's apology that sounded like a scream in Grace's crying voice. I was so angry at Jacob's behavior that I frantically called out to Grace. First, I quieted Grace, telling her to calm down and listen, and then I told her, "You need to call the number I'm going to tell you now. Then it will help my mom," I tell her in a voice as loud as Jacob's, who is on a rampage and while working hard to appear calm. Grace nodded her head, and the video phone went dead. The angry shouts and noises that I heard all the way until Grace hung up the video phone were enough to stir not only Mary and Grace who were there, but also me. I had no idea that Jacob was such a violent person. Since we had been in the U.S., Mary and Grace had gradually lost weight. Their voices were listless, and I had seen Grace's blue bruise when I had just turned on the video conference phone. I felt my gut churn, and I couldn't calm down when I thought that all of them were caused by Jacob. Panicking, I gave Grace some advice, but I couldn't help but worry about whether or not it went well. All I could do was wait and wait for some kind of news to arrive, hoping with all my heart that she would be all right. A few hours later, I received another call from Mary, and I rushed to answer the video phone. The first thing I see on the screen is a dilapidated room and a pair of eyes that have cleared up. Then Mary cried and thanked me over and over again. I patiently reminded Grace to contact the local police. I then looked up the number of the local police in a panic on behalf of Grace, who was so panicked that she did not know what to do. Then, in a loud voice to make her focus on my voice, I gave Grace the number and told her, "Tell them help Mother killed," I said. Grace did as I told her, frantically calling the police and telling them just that over and over again. At first, the local police thought it was a prank call, partly because Grace spoke so poorly. However, the way Grace was crying and repeating frantically, and the graphic screams coming from behind her, they apparently decided that it was not a prank and dispatched emergency personnel to the scene. A few minutes after the report was made and accepted, the local police seemed to rush to Grace and the others. Jacob, who had not realized that Grace was doing such a thing, was upset by the sudden appearance of the police. He was taken aback by the sudden raid and tried desperately to convince them that he was innocent, but it seems that they could hear him yelling outside the house, and he was taken away by the police without any excuse. When Mary told me what had happened, I was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. If I had made a mistake, not only Grace but also Mary would have been in a terrible situation. Thinking of this, the tea I had brewed to calm myself down no longer made it down my throat, and I just clasped my hands together in prayer. Fortunately, both Mary and Grace seemed to have suffered only minor injuries, and I was able to see the peaceful expressions on their faces for the first time in a while, which made me cry along with them. Sometime after that, Mary and Grace came back to the U.S. first. After that, Jacob was detained for a while for interrogation and to settle international disputes, but it seems that he was barely released. However, it seems that the company was informed of the incident, which immediately became a problem within the company, and he was deported back to the U.S. Jacob came to my house immediately after he returned to the U.S. and blamed me for the whole incident. "It's your fault," he would yell at me in anger, but I was no longer intimidated by his childish behavior. "You had it coming. I was only protecting my precious daughter and grandchild," I said back to him with my chest puffed out, contrary to the attitude Jacob would have wanted me to have, and his face turned bright red in front of me. My words made Jacob even more agitated, and he tried to grab me like a child throwing a tantrum. But that didn't happen, and Mary restrained him and made him stop his behavior. "Enough," I said, and with that, Jacob's hands cut off the sky as he exploded in anger. Jacob is frozen in a blank stare at the sudden yell from the pupil. The pupil glares at Jacob, a complete change from before. "Did you think I didn't know anything?" And yelling in a voice as loud as Jacob earlier, slammed a certain envelope into Jacob's face. The envelope contained a report that Jacob had been having an affair. In fact, Mary knew that Jacob had been cheating on her for many years. However, even though she knew, she was afraid that Jacob would be upset when she confronted him with the truth. Grace was still a young girl. Even if he did not do anything to Mary because of the fact she did not want Grace to become a target. Mary's parental love can be felt even by me. She'd spent her life in fear of Jacob in this way. But Mary, encouraged by my actions in the shadow of the recent incident, had decided to confront him with her own will. "I'm divorcing you. I have evidence of the domestic violence you've committed, and I'm going to charge you alimony. So be prepared." When she raised her voice at him, his face instantly turned pale. As if to push him further, I joined her. "If you make any more noise, you will be in trouble with the police in the U.S., I said firmly, and Jacob cracked up, then collapsed to his knees as if he thought there was nothing more he could do. I dragged Jacob out of the house and locked the front door to prevent him from entering again. I turned around with breathing on my shoulder quickly. There was Grace, who had probably seen what had just happened, and she rushed toward Grace. She hugged Grace and apologized to her, tears streaming down her face. She apologized over and over again. Then, as Grace hugged Mary, she understood the situation and hugged Mary back, and her tears started to flow, and she finally cried out loud. I hugged them both, and for a while the three of us cried our eyes out together. I don't know if it was because he heard us, but instead of yelling and pleading with us to open the door, Jacob disappeared from the doorway when we came to. In hindsight, it would not have been surprising if he had made a big fuss again, but perhaps it was the fact that he told the American police that he would be bothering them as well, or perhaps he was overcome by the words from Mary. Whatever the reason, Jacob never appeared in front of us again. After that, Mary and Jacob's divorce was successfully finalized. Now both Mary and Grace are living together in my house. I had wanted to do so for a long time, and I was enjoying every day. As for Jacob, after being taken care of by the police overseas, the affair was soon discovered, and the company could no longer keep quiet about it, so he was firmly fired. The firing was only for the person in question, but in reality, Jacob apparently resigned voluntarily. Either way, he still lost his job, and Jacob must do whatever it takes to secure the money he is now obliged to pay as a result of the divorce. However, word of his case seems to be spreading among his clients, and even if he were to find a new job, it is likely to be difficult for him to do so. Jacob, who desperately needs money right now, is working desperately to pay the alimony and child support demanded by Mary, while holding down a part-time job at a place that has barely accepted him. Incidentally, I heard that Jacob switched the contents of the Thanksgiving Day gift in order to harass me. Now Mary has returned to the company where she worked before her marriage and is working hard, partly because I am cooperating with her. Grace has also started taking lessons that she had been holding back because of Jacob, and she seems to be enjoying her life